the moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerf Herder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Mike Mjolnir Evans. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
All right, let's get into it. This is 50.
This is it. 5-0.
All right, guys, here we are. 50 years old. 50 years old.
I'm old.
And I like to kick, stretch, and kick. I'm 50. 50 years old.
Well, actually, 50 episodes old. We're at only 1 year old. Not even a year old.
Not even. We have 2 more episodes for that.
Thus beginneth season 2.
Season 2. I like the sound of that. So we're coming to a season finale. So
But congratulations for all. We have doggedly stuck to it. Every week we've put out a new episode since April 14th of last year.
Better than Kevin Smith.
Yeah. Thank you for everybody that's been listening recently, and if you've stuck with us from the beginning.
I actually give those
really
people more
ill-formed
credit.
episode. So to celebrate, not only do we want to trumpet ourselves and use our 5-bucket fanfare, which we usually only reserve for very special occasions. We would like to offer you our top 5 sci-fi fantasy shows of the past 50 years. To begin our 50th episode, we do have some news. So, Jeff, I'm going to let you take it away here.
We're going to start off with the big one. Mr. James Gunn, he's back on board the Milano. That's all I need to say. Disney has reversed course, and they have rehired him for Guardians of the Galaxy 3 as director, which is just huge.
I think the entire Marvel fandom just breathed a sigh of relief once they got that news.
It was actually on the scroll on the Channel 2 news this morning. Yes.
I will say my social media feeds between Instagram and Facebook have just exploded. I'm sure on Twitter as well. Yeah, unjustly fired for something he did years ago and atoned for, but apparently Disney and their knee-jerk reaction fired him, let him go, claimed they weren't going to use his script. DC promptly scooped him up. If they're going to hire him, maybe we should hire him back. So right now, he's still officially attached to Suicide Squad 2, which I think will not start filming until next year. They're reusing his script. They're using his script that he had already written for Guardians 3. We talked about this before, that, you know, these characters are his. He has really kind of made these Marvel characters his, to the point where he had a lot to say with how they were treated in the Avengers movies. So, it's very exciting.
Yeah, and he was obviously going somewhere with it, with the introduction of Adam Warlock at the end of 2. So I'm glad that that's not falling into somebody else's hands.
Right. So we'll see. So very exciting. So that's our big news for the day.
Yeah. And as you were saying, he's apparently contracted with DC to make this Suicide Squad 2 movie. And Marvel is conceding, and they're not going to start even pre-production on Guardians until he's done with Suicide Squad 2.
Yeah. So you're talking probably 2023. By the time this thing comes out.
Yeah, and I don't know what the original schedule was before the whole controversy.
I don't know either, because that's the one thing I'll say, which is Marvel's really held a tight lip about any of this stuff coming up after Endgame. Outside of the fact that we already seen trailers for Spider-Man Far From Home, and we know that there's a Doctor Strange 2 in the works, we really don't know where they're going with this stuff. And I think that that's good, because we're now walking into Endgame with serious apprehension of where these characters are going to go.
But we do have Black Widow as well, right?
That's been rumored. Has it been officially greenlit?
I think it has. I've heard a lot about it. A prequel movie for Black.
Oh, it's a prequel. Okay. Yeah. So very exciting news for Marvel lights out there, Marvel Zombies. We know that Time Bandits, they're going to make a TV show out of this. We talked about this.
We did talk about this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they've officially hired the guy who directed Thor Ragnarok, Taika Waititi.
Yes.
And
Tiki?
Yeah, and he will be directing, which is cool because he has a very unique look and feel and style. Whether or not he's directing all the episodes, a single episode, the premiere episode, I don't know. But just to have his name attached to this, and this is coming out on Apple TV, by the way. Yeah, one more.
So more money?
More money, more money, more money.
Well, one more platform. Although I do have to ask, are there really 6 employable little people out there? They're going to have to dig deep, right? Anyways, see, go back to Disney for a little bit. I think the end of this month, the Disney acquisition of 20th Century Fox will actually be complete. That's a $71.3 billion transaction. And Disney will officially own back all of their characters that 20th Century had taken from them. And with that, Marvel has announced on their Disney Plus streaming service a new TV show called What-If. Now, Mike, Jim, I'm pretty sure that we're all familiar with the Marvel What-Ifs back in the day, which were really kind of cool concepts where you took like standard storylines and just kind of tweaked them. So it was, what if Spider-Man was a woman? So they're kind of cool alternate universe type of things. Some of them have actually come to pass in the Marvel universe. One of them I think was like, what if Dr. Doom had become a hero? But I would think in the television format, you would have to be very familiar with the actual source material to realize what kind of twists they're playing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
From what I'm getting is that this is going to be animated.
I was going to say, you couldn't have a What If live action series with and involve Spider-Man and major characters like that without bringing in other actors. Because obviously you're not going to get a Tom Holland every time you bring Spider-Man into What If.
No, I think it's going to be animated, but I think it's interesting. But you're really catering to the hardcore comic book reader. You know, because one of the bigger books was, What If Phoenix Had Lived, which she was dead for years, but now she's alive every other week. They kill her off. There's multiple versions of her. So as a casual watcher, they would be like, but wait a minute, she is still alive. Anyways, that's interesting.
So they won't do that one.
Maybe. I think there was one, what if Silver Surfer possessed the Infinity Gauntlet?
What if Gwen Stacy lived is one?
Right. Yes, you're right. Yeah. We already have Gwen Stacy back. I mean, she's an alternate universe version.
What if ROM was not owned by Parker Brothers?
I would so love a ROM and a Micronauts.
Yes.
Right? Micronauts was one of my favorite series. And then the only other news, April 14th is barreling toward us, Jim. That is the premiere date of the final season of Game of Thrones. We had talked about this, that you have not watched a single episode.
I have not. If you remember, back in TMI history, one of our first confessionals, and I think Dave came up with this one, is there a movie or show that you haven't watched just because everybody else has? And my answer was Monty Python and the Holy Grail, but it may have well as been Game of Thrones, because in the beginning, everybody and their brother was talking about this show. It's kind of like that old adage, a million Elvis fans can't be wrong. But I usually think that a million Elvis fans can be wrong. So that's why I was avoiding the show. It's like, well, if, this moron likes it, there's no way that I'm going to like it.
To the masses?
Yeah.
It wasn't too niche for you.
But as the seasons went on, thinking more and more, there's got to be something to this. Jeff watches it. Mike watches it. Everybody watches it. So I may as well jump on the bandwagon. But then I heard almost immediately after I got that realization that it was ending in the next season or two. So then I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to wait until the last season is about to air, and then I'll binge the entire thing leading right up to that last season. And that's what I've been doing. I just started about a week ago.
Okay, all right.
And I've got 4 episodes
I'd be impressed.
in.
4 episodes in.
4 episodes in on the first season. And watching, it kind of lessens as the episodes go on, but you really get a sense that they put everything on the line in that first episode because it's extremely gripping and it draws you right in. But at times it feels like you're watching a movie on the old Cinemax at midnight or 1 a.m. in the morning.
I have to go back and rewatch it. You're saying there's a little bit of cheese attached to it?
There's a whole lot of cheese attached to it.
Is there? Yeah.
There's the lead actress,
Daenerys.
She's naked quite a bit in the first episode, to the fact that it's almost voyeuristic, where it's like naked close-ups.
And you get Aquaman. Has Aquaman showed up yet?
Oh, he shows up in the very first episode.
Oh, does he? I don't remember.
Yeah. But there was so much nudity going on in that first episode. I'm thinking, is that what's going to be in every episode? Is that, is that really this hardcore? And it's not really. I think, again, like I had explained, they have it all in the first episode to really hook you in. I really enjoyed it.
This is an investment of time. These are like an hour long, right?
They are.
Yeah, no, this is, and it's a lot to take in. There's a lot thrown at you in these episodes. Information, characters, names.
Speaking of Game of Thrones, as we just mentioned, on the same, not day, but same week that Game of Thrones drops, Avengers Endgame comes out. And I've been reading a lot of conjecture as to what Marvel might be doing during Phase 4, is it now that they're going into after Endgame? Phase 4.
This would be 4.
So there's got to be a new big bad, right? That the new flock of heroes are going to be eventually fighting against. Some thought it may have been the Skrulls when that theory was blown out of the water with Captain Marvel, seeing as the Skrulls are kind of the sympathetic characters now. There was one very interesting article I read that offered up Doctor Doom as the new big bad. And now that the 20th Century Fox deal is going through, Marvel will have rights to him again.
There's speculation also that it could be Galactus.
Galactus
Kang the
as well.
Conqueror. Kang, you can get into time travel.
Yeah, and of course, if you had any of those characters, you would want to bring in the Fantastic Four, I would think, in some way, shape, or form. I don't know if they still think that's too early, though. But
I just don't think that they can make a good movie with the Fantastic Four in it. I just don't think it's possible.
I don't know. It's got to be crackable. I don't know. I just really hope they bring the Tesseract back.
you haven't seen enough of that.
I can't get enough of that thing. That cosmic cube.
The crazy
cosmic cube.
That's going to be on the McDonald's menu pretty soon. You can order a MacGuffin and they give you the Tesseract.
Nice. It's a glowing blue.
Of course it does.
I like it. I'm in. So that's all our news.
All right, so let's start with top 5 TV series of the past 50 years, sci-fi or fantasy. So who wants to go first with their number 5?
I'm curious where Jeff is at on this.
Oh, you want to go? I'll start off with my number 5. I will tell you, I had a really hard time with this. Boy, I jockeyed around shows left and right. Here we go. I went all the way to 10, and then I have about another 12 honorable mentions. And I'm sure we'll hit on every one of them.
This is going to be like an Oscar speech, isn't it?
Well,
I would also like to thank...
Start playing the music, Jim.
Yeah.
My number 5, 2003 miniseries, and then the series ran from 2004 to 2009 on the Sci-Fi channel. Any guesses?
A miniseries?
There was a miniseries in 2003, but then it ran as a series from 4 to 9.
Aeon Flux.
Aeon Flux. No, Battlestar Galactica.
That's number 5?
That's my number 5. It was a miniseries first. It was, I think it was two 2-hour movies or a 4-episode. Yeah, those first couple episodes were considered a miniseries.
They had no expectation of making that into a full series?
No, I think they threw out the miniseries first before that. I think they officially greenlit the series itself, but they did spread that out. That was horrible, which was seasons were only 10 episodes, but it took you like 19 months to watch it.
I got into it late, so I was sort of like binging the first. How many seasons did it go for in total?
I want to say 4, 2004 to 2009, but like I said, I think there's 4 seasons.
They stretched them out, as you said.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There was like 10 episodes, and they would run like 5.
It was almost like season 2.5, season 2.75.
Yeah, you would have to wait like 9 months before they launched the other 5 episodes. By then, you forgot completely. This show just blew my mind. This was such a out of left fields, because it's based on the silly Battlestar Galactica from the late 70s, which was just a blatant ripoff of Star Wars when it came out.
But it had its own charm.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, don't worry. We'll be talking about the original Battlestar Galactica again. But this show was just down and dirty and gritty, and it was unlike anything I think that I had seen on TV. I mean, they really got... Some of these episodes were pretty rough, but it was well done, and you were sucked in. That's my number 5.
Yeah, it was interesting how they did it, actually, because you're right, it was down and dirty, and it was so much better than the original.
Right. Well, the original was like bubblegum. I mean, it was just poppy. It was brightly lit. The characters were all bubbly. There really was no drama per se.
They did keep the characters from the original, though, which was...
Yeah. The big thing was, by switching over Starbuck to be a woman, that was a big, huge to-do. And obviously, Katie Sackhoff just absolutely killed it as a character. And Edward James Olmos, who had a fair level of gravitas coming into this, basically signed up as a Dama, with the notion that the minute an alien shows up on my ship, I'm out of here. It was gritty. I don't know how else to say it. It was, some of the characters were definitely not likable.
Those first episodes, and I guess this is the miniseries that you referenced, Jeff, when you actually set up the plot where the Cylons destroy the planet, and this last Battlestar is just skipping through hyperspace. What do they call it on the show? I don't even remember. Light speed hyperspace?
Well, when they jump, they call it FTL, right?
Faster than light. Faster than light, yeah.
So they keep jumping, and the Cylons are right there with them, and they have so many seconds before the Cylons
show up again.
They show up again. So it's just like this really hammering over your head, this tension, knowing that the Cylons are right on their tail, and you don't know who's going to die or what, because as you said, they really set it up early on that this is a dark show. It's not as light as... And I don't know, they were in the same basic predicament in the original series. But it never was like that. It was never.
Oh no, yeah, right. No, it was. Matter of fact, Adama made in the original series. Adama made up the story of Earth just to give the people hope, because so the Cylons. Anybody who doesn't know the premise for the show, which is after a 1,000-year war with the Cylons or whatever, they come out of nowhere and they're going to have a peace treaty, and then they basically sneak attack and destroy all of humanity except for a handful of ships. And this ship was to be decommissioned. It was going to become a museum. So it really didn't have war capabilities. It didn't really have the FTL and all this other stuff intact.
Right.
It really
and they had landlines on the ship, and I think that's one of the reasons why that it survived is
because it was not connected to the rest of the fleet. Yeah. And just the story itself of the Cylons, it's a much more integrated story of who and what the Cylons are and what their motivations are. And you see Seven as one of the Cylons.
And a hot number 7.
Yeah, well, Trisha Helfer, yes. That's my number 5. And it was a hard-fought number 5. Let's put it that way.
And that is a great show. And I stayed away from it for this particular countdown because I knew it would be well represented here, so I didn't want to tread on your...
I got the impression that Mike thought it was too low.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, see. But that's what I'm saying, which is I really had to... Part of thinking about this is, what is your criteria for what's considered your top sci-fi show? Again, we go back to the movies. There's a nostalgia factor attached to some of this stuff, but it's also rewatchability. If it's on TV, do you stop and watch that episode, regardless of where it is within the season? I don't like shows that adhere to the Gilligan's Island mentality, which is characters have an adventure and the next episode, everything's reset and they don't learn anything from it.
And no reference is ever made to that episode again.
Ever. And in this Battlestar Galactica, there's you see the evolution of these characters.
And they're constantly referencing past events that take place on the show.
Yeah. So,
and let's also talk about how it had guest appearances from some of the original cast from the original
they did bring in Richard Hatch. Richard Hatch was trying to push his own reboot right around the time this came out. Now, this is, I think Glenn A. Larson, who was part of the creator of the original, is attached to this show. But there's a point where they just brought in Richard Hatch, and he played a great character on this show. Yeah. Completely against type of who and what he was back in the 70s version.
And I was so disappointed that Dirk Benedict never made it on.
No.
I was so waiting for just even a walk-on from
I think he was disappointed too. He right? Even like a little flashback, a little Starbuck kind of a throwaway gag or something.
You said 4 seasons that were just...
I want to say it was 4 seasons without looking it up right now.
I was completely invested in that show the first maybe 3 seasons. And in the 4th, it did slow down a bit when it got into Starbuck and her connection with the Cylons and then the final 5. And then it picked up again in the last couple episodes. So you could tell where Sci-Fi was kind of stretching out the budget when it was just Sci-Fi free pretty much episodes of just drama on the ship. And then you would get an episode with a lot of battle sequences.
Action,
like that. Yeah. So they started to drag it a little too much for me towards the end of the show, but it picked up again once they actually concluded it. I'm
going to say there's a fair amount of these shows that sometimes outlive their relevance.
In what way? What do you...
We'll get into some of the, but just shows that, like you said, there's a couple shows they went in with a specific model. This is how many episodes we're going to do. This is my story from beginning to end, and we stick to it. Galactica, I think the big drawback was a lot of people were unhappy with the last episode, how they kind of wrapped everything up. But whether or not that was sometimes you just make this stuff up as you go, and it
You
doesn't.
mean with them finding Earth and populating?
Yeah, that it was,
Earth?
and they were all our ancestors. Yes,
You
spoiler.
see, I love that. I thought that was.
I loved it as well. Yeah,
It was so out there, and it was just completely apropos for the show. It was just what you didn't expect.
What was very confusing, without getting too much into the show, is when they brought in All Along the Watchtower, which was a Jimi Hendrix song that these Cylons somehow had in their brain. And it made no sense because it's a song that exists on our universe, in our timeline. And yet, how do they know what this song, you know what I'm saying? It took you out of the show because you're like, all right, what does this mean? Yeah. And then to find out that they arrive on Earth like millions of years ago and they are our ancestors.
At least they didn't do a reboot of Galactica 1980.
Oh, that was Chips in Space. And the only thing at least they brought Starbuck back on that show.
Yes, they did. Yeah.
Bonus points if you can tell me his Cylon friend's name. That was the one episode, Return of Starbuck. All right, I'll leave that for the listeners.
Urkel.
Urkel.
Did I do that?
My Urkel. Did I do that? So, who's going next?
It wasn't Cousin Arthur, was it?
I'll throw down.
Go ahead, go.
And I'm like, can this go on this list? So you guys can give me your honest opinion if this show can go on the list.
It's on your list now, so let's go.
$6 Million Man.
Yes.
Oh, it's on there.
It's on there. So what year is this? This finished in, what was it, like 5 seasons, finishing in 77 or something? 78?
I think they finished up with like a series of movies.
That show dominated the mid to late 70s.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. What kid didn't go to the playground and immediately start fake fighting with a... Jumped off the swing set and you're like...
I think Friday the 13th stole that for their...
Steve Austin wants his sound effects back.
But you bet that's one of those classic shows with the opening narration. You know, you don't get.
Oh, that may be one of the greatest openings.
Yeah,
because obviously it's all found footage, but yeah, that's great. I mean, you just set up the character right then and now. I want to see that episode because I think when the series starts, he's already who he is.
Because we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
Yep, better, faster, stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lived for those Bigfoot episodes.
The Bigfoot, yes.
As a matter of fact, I was traveling for business with a coworker, and we got talking about obscure TV shows, and we both threw down who played Bigfoot and got into a massive battle over this.
It was Andre the Giant.
There were 2 episodes. 2 different actors played. You are correct. Andre the Giant was one of them. And that was the one I was like, what? There's no way Andre the Giant played this guy. Sure enough, he was. The other one was Ted Cassidy. Lurch.
Oh, really?
Yep. So we were both right, but we ended up putting money on it. We put wagers down because I was so adamant driving in this car going, no, there's no way Andre the Giant. Yeah, Andre the Giant and Ted Cassidy.
And if you remember, the $6 Million Man 12-inch action figures.
Oh, yeah, with the little bionic eye.
With the bionic eye, you know, really, which they did with Boba Fett years later.
Sure did, yep.
And he also had skin on one of his arms that you could roll back.
And he had the little circuits.
The circuits, yes. Yeah. And they had a Bigfoot figure in the same line as well.
Yeah, I never.
My friend had the Bigfoot figure.
I never had the Bigfoot.
Yeah, they had an Oscar figure too, right?
Yeah, because his face came off. Was he the Fembot?
Yeah.
Version? It wasn't a Fembot. What were they called? They were called something, but I know Austin Powers kind of did a goof on that. So then he
could double, that figure could double as Yul Brynner from Westworld.
Right. You just put a cowboy hat on, you're good to go.
Good choice, Mike.
That's a good choice.
So my number 5, and Mike, I know I turned you onto the show at some point in the past few years. Jeff, I don't know if you've ever seen it. This is a little bit more obscure. This is a BBC show called Survivors.
Never heard of it.
From 1975 to 1977. And of course, this is something that never showed on American TV, and I only saw it probably 5 or 6 years ago, rented the DVDs from Netflix. It's a show about a flu-like pandemic. It's a very much like a Walking Dead type end of the world show. And this flu is released, and you see it in the opening credit sequence. Every episode has the same opening credit sequence, and it's a doctor in China who I like to call Butterfingers.
Butterfingers?
Oops.
You see him handling a virus in a vial, and he drops it. and the virus opens up in his lab, and then the next shot in the opening credit scene is he's getting on a plane and going somewhere. And then you see, of course, the classic Raiders of the Lost Ark plane line going across the globe. So you see how the virus spreads.
And you just see people dropping dead behind the line.
The show begins in England. So that, of course, that's where it's set. It's a BBC show. They call it the death, this sickness, and it kills 4,999 people out of every 5,000. So very few survivors left. And the show
two people left on the planet.
Yeah. So survivors finding each other and trying to start a new society. And it's filmed very much like the old Doctor Who on video camera. So it kind of looks like a soap opera.
Soap opera feel to it.
And by the end of the show, by the end of the third season, they reestablish a form of electricity, a rudimentary railway system, and law and order.
Which is a different show, by the way.
So you kind of see society taken back to square one and then rebuilt over these 3 years. And it's done in a very realistic way because they have to stay out of the cities, not only for budgetary purposes. They're always in the country like they are in The Walking Dead, but they explain it because there's so many dead bodies in the city. The plague is back. So anybody that goes into the city gets the bubonic plague, spread by rats or just being there for whatever. So just being a fan of the zombie genre, not that this is zombies, but it's a very much set up like a zombie type movie, end of the world scenario. And also, The Stand by Stephen King happens to be one of my top 3 novels of all time. And the story is just very similar. There's no Man in Black Randall Flagg figure in Survivors, but it made me wonder, did Stephen King see this and take the idea and make it's too similar. But apparently Stephen King came up with The Stand completely coincidentally as this was coming to be. Is
that the story he's sticking with?
Well, he's saying that The Stand was inspired by real life news of chemical spills and radioactivity spills that he saw when he was on vacation out west.
He's going to stand by that?
He's going to stand by that. But yes, number 5 is Survivors for me.
Okay.
I love that show. Did you watch the 2008 Survivors?
I did. BBC rebooted this in 2008. It only lasted 2 seasons before it was done, and they canceled it. So
everybody died?
No, it was going in a real World War Z
obviously
direction.
Walking Dead was probably was Walking Dead out by then? No,
it wasn't.
No, they were ahead of the curve on this. So it wasn't like they were jumping on the bandwagon.
Apparently, it's a big cult show in England. It has a cult of its own. So Jeff,
I might have to look it up.
Yeah, I heartily recommend that you look this up. Survivors.
Yeah, I would totally recommend it. Both of them are very good.
Okay, check it out. Cool. So that's our number 5, huh?
Number 5.
All right. So now I'm number 4. All right, this one's obscure. I don't know if either one of you guys ever watched this show. Babylon 5.
No, I've never seen it.
You've never seen an episode. Do you know
never
of it?
Never seen an episode.
Never.
Do you know of it? Mike?
Yes, I know of it.
I know of it, yes.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
No, this is
number 4.
It came out in 94 through 98. This was like a show that my wife was invested in, and we would watch it religiously. So basically, it's a 5-mile-long space station in neutral space. It takes place in like the 23rd century. But there's a lot of big-name characters on here. And the thing for me, so J. Michael Straczynski, Mike, you might recognize his name. I think he wrote for Spider-Man for a while. Mm-hmm. But he created this show, and he created an entire 5-year Bible. He had this show set up from day one all the way through to what the season finale was going to be. And he shopped this around, and he went to Paramount with it, and who obviously had Star Trek. And as the story goes, they poo-pooed it that no one would ever watch a show about a stagnant space station and dismissed him, and then immediately created Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which is Star Trek on a stagnant space station. Right. There's been a lot of feuding over the years. There's really no concrete proof that they stole this, but there's enough, I guess both shows were in development at the same time, and there's a lot of similarities to the point where some of the character names on Deep Space Nine are the same as what's on this show. But the brilliance was the fact that he had this completely written out, and he knew so little plot points and characters that show up in season 1 or become these huge major issues in season 4. So there's this huge progression, and you see he had a plan, unlike, like I was saying, some of these other shows that just kind of outlive, we'll get into the X-Files a little bit. But this show was just so well done. Jeff Conaway from Taxi, he was in it. Walter Koenig, who's Chekhov. He was on this show. Billy Mooney, who's from Lost in Space. He was on the show. Stephen First, we know as Flounder from Animal House. He was on the show.
Flounder.
Yes. Bruce Boxleitner of Tron fame. He was.
Who was the lead? Was it Kanicki?
He was Kanicki. Yes. Yeah. A hickey from Kanicki in Space is worthy of. I love this show. Peter David, who's another big sci-fi writer. I think he wrote The Hulk for a long time. He wrote for these shows. Very well done. It was probably one of the first real weekly use of CG for the ships.
So when did this air, and what did it air on?
It was 94 to 98, and I want to say UPN didn't exist because it's obviously that was Paramount, but I think it ran. It was like syndicated. Okay. So it was picked up. I want to say we used to watch it on the WB.
I always assumed Babylon 5 was a Star Trek show, but I guess not.
No, it's a standalone. Like I said, the lore is that Star Trek Paramount ripped them off Deep Space Nine, which was one of the better Star Trek shows, by the way. But yeah, I love this show. I thought it was great. And again, its characters' actions had repercussions over the course. There you go. That's my 4.
I may try to look that up. If it's a 4, I'll give it a shot.
I think it's Mike's turn.
No, it's my turn. Okay, I'm going to put this on number 4 mainly because it was an endurance test. And I'm proud of myself for finishing it more than I think that it's my top 4. Falling Skies.
Okay.
Oh.
A more recent.
Yeah. This was 2011 to 2015. I think it was 5 seasons long. Extraterrestrial invasion.
Yep.
Following, who was it? Tom Mason with the masked militia, I think.
Yep, and he was a history teacher.
He was a history teacher, yes. And Dan Weaver, who was kind of the colonel or general or whatever, fighting the Skitters and their plans to take over Earth.
I'm still disappointed they haven't made a candy named after the Skitters. Yeah.
Skitters.
It was, for the first couple seasons, I enjoyed it. And then by the time it got into 3 or 4, I was ready for it to end. And I think that's why it hit my top 4 list, was just because I was just happy it ended.
You just wanted to congratulate yourself that you made it through.
Yeah, it was executive produced by Steven Spielberg, and you cannot tell it all.
Yeah. There's a screaming endorsement. But that's what I'm getting into. Or some of these shows outlived their shelf life.
Falling Skies, I loved the first couple of seasons, but then there's something that happened in between maybe the second or third where it just got too long.
Yeah.
And the break between seasons was just too long. It was a year between seasons, right?
Yeah, it was very convoluted as well.
By the time it came back, you felt obligated to watch it.
Right.
Yep. And didn't they bring in Juliet from Lost, who was also on Revolution, the blonde? I can't think of the actress.
Elizabeth Mitchell, right?
Elizabeth Mitchell. You're right. That's her. Yeah, and there was a backstory where the son was abducted and he was controlled by them. They freed him.
Yeah, because the Skitters put the mind control thing down your spine.
Yeah, it's like this. It's like a caterpillar with spikes through the spine.
But it wasn't. The Skitters were actually the slaves of the real aliens that were controlling everything behind. And then they had that whole sequence where President Mason, because he becomes president at one point, commandeers a spaceship and goes to the moon on a.
Right. Yes. Yes.
And his daughter was an alien, and
yes, that's where you had a great premise, but you didn't know where to go with it.
Yep.
Yes.
Did we all finish it?
I did. Yeah. Again, you're invested, right? That's like Revolution. I brought up Revolution. Revolution was another show that had a great premise and then just fell off the map. Yep. And when it came back, you're like, well, I have to see how they wrap it up. And they didn't. And that's very disappointing. It's very frustrating when you're invested in the show. And that's why sometimes you don't get invested in the show. Yeah. Because all of a sudden, Dark Angel. We used to watch Dark Angel. My wife loved Dark Angel. Season 2 came, and by the 3rd episode, she's like, this is stupid. And I'm like, wait, so you buy the idea that she's, whatever.
Yeah, Terra Nova was a little bit like that.
Terra Nova, dude.
Terra
Nova. Well, you're
that almost left my consciousness.
I don't,
brought it up.
Terra Nova.
Obviously, we don't have, we can't research each other's shows here, so I don't know the name of this actor that played Colonel Weaver. But whenever I see him in another movie...
Oh, he immediately takes you out because you're like, I know he was in something recently.
He was, and he didn't have a ponytail. And I'm like, he should have a ponytail.
And then I become like my wife, which is like, who's that guy? That guy was in that thing. And I'm like, shut up, I'll watch it.
Will Patton.
I did have a lot of promise.
Jim, you want to take us to something more reasonable?
All right, my number 4 is, again, mining the 70s, going back, In Search Of.
Ooh.
And I consider this a series. This is not, not fictionalized. Yeah. Some people may consider it fictionalized, but I sure didn't as a 7 or 8 year old watching.
No.
So In Search Of was an anthology show. It was, each episode was a standalone. It was a documentary series hosted by Leonard Nimoy, and it ran from 1977 to 1982. It was a syndicated show. So you would see it on your Channel 9, WOR in the New York area, PIX, Channel 11, that type of thing. And they would do episodes on Bigfoot, UFO, Loch Ness Monster,
Noah's Ark,
Easter Island, anything mysterious.
Anything that the Travel Channel now has on 24/7. They should just rename the History Channel, exactly. The National Channel. Yeah.
So this was just one of many shows that were conspiring in the 70s to give me nightmares. So these shows are really bizarre. You don't really get this stuff anymore. Just the weird synthesized music in this show was enough to scare you.
Enough to set you off, yeah.
So, for example, they did episodes on pretty benign subjects, like the mysterious death of Glenn Miller from the Glenn Miller Orchestra. They did a Vincent Van Gogh episode. They did a D.B. Cooper episode. Because of that synthesized
We're still doing
music,
D.B. Cooper episodes.
Because of that synthesized music, I was scared of D.B. Cooper. I'm like, I'm not going in the woods. D.B. Cooper's going to be in the woods.
He's out there in his parachute.
A man called D.B. Cooper by the news media jumped from the plane over dense forest carrying 4 parachutes and $200,000. Why is the crime still unsolved? Who is Cooper? Where is the money today?
They could have done an episode about me losing my car keys, and I would be scared if they played that synthesized music. That where is his car keys? They actually came out with a soundtrack album to this in 1977, and I so wish that I could get my hands on it.
That's funny. Well, they came out with a series of movies, too, because I remember dragging my dad to go watch In Search of Bigfoot and In Search of Noah's Ark.
Now, did you guys know, I know you're fans of In Search Of, but did you guys know that the series was based on 3 movies that pre-In Search Of that were hosted by Rod Serling?
Oh, I was not aware.
And Rod Serling was set to be the host of the TV show, but he died right before the first show was about to go into production, and they got Leonard Nimoy.
So they brought in Spock.
They did, yes.
Logical choice. That's a good one.
It had 2 reboots. In 2002 with Mitch Pileggi from the X-Files. I think that only lasted maybe 8 episodes.
In Search of a Host.
And then in 2018, did you know it was rebooted just last year?
Yeah, I do know that they just rebooted it recently.
With, predictably, Zachary Quinto following the steps again of Leonard Nimoy.
That's a little too on the nose, right?
It is, isn't it?
Well, he's dead. So.
I didn't even realize that until I read it doing research for this show, and I thought to myself,
where did that air, though? Because I do remember reading that when it came out, and I probably watched half of an episode, and
it
was
on
just
the History
him.
Channel.
History Channel. Oh, shocking. Yeah, there you go.
History Channel, yeah.
Yeah, In Search of History, because they're anything but historical now. It's all fantastic.
So that's where you got, as a kid, your Bigfoot and your UFO and your Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah, we didn't have, the internet. There wasn't even books in the library on Bigfoot.
So, that's my number 4, is In Search Of.
Nice. That's a good one.
That is.
That didn't even show up on my radar. I'm going back to the well on number 3 because I said we were going to talk about this, which is the original Battlestar Galactica, which came out in 1978, ran 1 year. Everybody was on the Star Wars bandwagon, and this was the biggest one out there. Sunday nights, man. This was not to be missed, and I loved it. I absolutely love it.
How long did it run for?
1 season, because it was $1 million an episode.
Are you kidding? 1 season?
78 to 79. There's only 24 episodes. It ran 1 season. It was a $1 million a week episode, which was monumental. And they reused, even as a kid, you realize they just reused the same footage of the Cylon Warriors.
I think that was Lorne Green's salary per episode.
Just for his toupee. So they rebooted it, and they came out with Galactica 1980, which, as we mentioned, was more just like, it was chips in space. The ship had made it to Earth, which they teased in the last episode of the original Galactica. They picked up a broadcast of the original moon landing. So you knew that they were close to Earth. And then it cuts. So now Boxy, the little boy in 1980, was much older. and him and I want to say it was Kent McCord, but I don't think it was. And they drove around fighting crime or whatever on Earth in these stupid space bikes. And then every now and again, you'd get a little flashback. There was none of the original characters except for Adama. And then there was this Dr. Z, who was like this kid genius who had like mental powers, and you don't know where he came from or whatever. And there was that one episode, that whole season is salvaged by the one episode of The Return of Starbuck, where you find that he was abandoned on a planet. There was one Cylon Centurion that he fixes up and he becomes his friend. And they hang out together, and it was like a buddy episode. I think his name was Psy, which is not that far of a stretch.
Now let's talk about some of the characters and alien races that did not make the transfer from the old show to the reboot that you named in your number 5, Jeff. Was it the Ovions or the
Ovions? They only met that once in the when they were on that casino planet when they stopped to fuel up.
Now they had an action
figure. That was in the movie.
Yeah. Okay, which
so Galactica in the UK, Galactica, the first 3 episodes were repackaged and sold in the theaters. It was a theatrical release for that.
As was Buck Rogers, right?
As was Buck Rogers.
Now, also, what was the name of that robot dog?
That was Muffet. That was
Muffet?
Muffet 2, actually, because his dog was, Boxy's dog was squished in the initial attack. And Jane
Seymour. Some darkness, I guess, right?
Jane Seymour. Yeah, there was. But it was, there was an episode where they dealt with a lot of the lower steerage class people that were trapped in some of the other ships. And they weren't getting food because the higher echelon guys were all living it up in this ship up front, and they were hoarding all the food. So there was some social commentary going on, but it was not done in a heavy-handed way, not like the reboot. But yeah, there was a one where they went to a nice planet, and every episode the Cylon Warriors were just
one step behind.
One step behind. You had Baltar, who was the human defector who decided to. In the movie, he was killed, but I think they cut that out and brought him back for the TV show. And he was a well-known actor too, right? He had been around for a while. John Colicos.
And obviously, they did keep
Imperious
the classic Cylon look for some of the older Cylons that they showed in the reboot of Battlestar Galactica. Hence,
yeah, they were like older, right? And even in this the Galactica itself, which is looking updated because it was a museum, they had the old-looking Vipers from the original TV show that were like on display, and they ended up having to refit them and use them, to fight the Cylons. So it was a fun show. I mean, again, it was. A cheap knockoff of Star Wars. Yeah.
Mike had brought up the reason he brought up Corvette Summer for his movie that he loved that nobody else knows about. Back then, you wanted anything space related after you had that Star Wars fix.
Yeah.
Battlestar was just the network's opportunity to cash in on a.
Yeah. And they did it in a big way. I mean, I was all in on that.
Yeah.
Who didn't love Starbuck? Cassiopeia, Athena.
And let's talk about the toys for Battlestar for a second. That's the reason.
I had those. I had them, yeah.
That's the reason we don't have the Boba Fett with the firing missile, is the Battlestar toy.
I don't know, some little kid choked on it. I do remember with my friend John in science class in 6th grade walking around with the big yardsticks through our belt loop. And by your command, and we would pretend we were Cylon Warriors. It was a good stuff, man.
Yeah.
Lunch pails. You named it. Action figures. They went all in. Great opening theme. That's my 3.
All right, Mike, what do you got? Number 3.
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things.
We have not overlapped at all yet. I'm very impressed.
Yeah, well, you guys seem to be stuck in the past, so it's...
Somebody's got to bring it, yeah.
And this is sort of like an instant classic, right? It goes back to, what is it, like 1984, 1985?
Yeah, talk about stuck in the past. This is
this is straight up nostalgia.
Yeah.
Right, but it's a new show in the past. I'm trying to bridge here, guys. I'm trying to bridge between us.
Well played.
Duffer Brothers, and just fantastic. I don't know if it has the highest Rotten Tomatoes score for both the season 1 and the season 2, but it's beloved by many. And it's one of those
phenomenal show.
Yeah.
It is absolutely phenomenal. It's great. Let's hope they can maintain it.
Yeah, I would hope so, because it's due out, I think, July 4th of this year for season 3.
I do believe season 3.
Yeah, but I mean, I just love the characters. I love the pacing of it. Love the premise, and I do love the nostalgia because I see myself in that era, riding bikes.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah,
I was surprised. I had no clue how much they really cribbed from Stephen King on some of this stuff with It.
Yeah, and even the font of the Stranger Things titles looks like the font from a Stephen King book from
now,
the
what
80s.
would have been nice is if every year, because it's the next year, they kind of changed it to match a little bit closer to stuff going on then. But yeah, I mean, the kids in the arcade playing game. I mean, who wasn't there?
Yeah.
Just, I wasn't sure how I felt about season 2. Some people thinking that was better than season 1, but I really have to go back and rewatch that, which I normally do before the next season comes out. So that's it.
Yeah, and Mike, you're saying that Falling Skies had the Spielberg influence as a producer, but it was not readily apparent at all.
Yeah.
This had no Steven Spielberg influence directly, and yet
right.
Yeah.
So
it was more Spielbergian than his own work.
It is so steeped in Spielberg that it's you can't avoid comparisons to his older stuff. Like E.T., is the thing that I think of with the kids
absolutely.
Pikes,
But I just love the stuff that just comes out of the blue. Where there's no expectation around it, there's no source material for it, and it just wow.
Yeah, you're right. And it really did it just showed up and became this zeitgeist moment where everybody was like, holy crap, this is good.
Yeah, and those kids are just amazing in season 1 and season 2. And I just hope they don't grow into 20-year-olds
still playing those characters.
Season, like show business kids often seem to do.
Well, you notice that the boy who plays Dusty is doing these Verizon commercials now, and he still has the lisp. I wonder if that's like an acting issue on his part. Like, does he maintain that, or does he really have this lisp?
I think he really has it.
That's like the...
It's like the same question. Does Paul Hogan, Crocodile Dundee, really play up that Australian accent? Does he really talk like that, or is it a little bit more mild?
Well, that's the actor who plays Kripke on Big Bang Theory. He talks like Elmo
Paul
Fudd.
Hogan? I was going to say, is Paul Hogan on the Big Bang Theory?
Oh, that's enough. Good call.
Let's hear it, Jim.
Nice. Okay, number 3 for me, Mystery Science Theater.
Oh, I was gonna. That's on my honorable mention, but that is. I question marked it too, whether or not that was even.
Now, Mystery Science Theater really influences this show that you're listening to in so many ways. I cannot count them. Most of all, our closing coda, which I took directly from Mystery Science Theater, but I always have to get in one little soundbite at the end of our show after our film rolls. So I'm giving props where it is deserved. And it's just such a funny show, which is created by Joel Hodgson, who is a stand-up comic that made some appearances on David Letterman and Saturday Night Live in the early 80s. And he had this idea. He got it from the visual of watching a movie and having the little talking heads at the bottom of the screen sitting in the first row of the theater. He got that from the insert of an Elton John album, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. And each of the songs on that album has a page on the inner sleeve of the album that has a little animation, an artwork. And the song is called I've Seen That Movie Too. And it's got a couple watching a movie that looks just like the silhouette of the heads at the bottom of Mystery Science Theater. So he took that visual, and he also took the idea of the movie Silent Running from 1972.
Which we have yet to review.
Which has Bruce Dern stuck up in a spaceship with robots as his only companions. So that's where he got the two general ideas. And then, of course, to riff on these terrible movies. It just brings all these genre movies that have been forgotten, or these exploitation movies that have just been pushed to the back of the cinematic history files, back to the fore. You never get the impression that, well, you do get the impression they're laughing at the movies, but they're also laughing with them, So,
absolutely. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And I remember when it first came out, it was on the Comedy Channel? It might have been Comedy Channel.
It was on Comedy Channel, then it went to Comedy Central, then it went to Sci-Fi, now it's on Netflix.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And it's changed hosts over the years.
Yeah, so we had Joel, then we had Michael Nelson after Joel, and then now we have Jonah Ray, who's on the current Netflix version of it. So all of them are great. It's still a very funny show, and they still they're still mining the cinematic files here for these terrible movies. I still watch it.
They've done a couple live performances. My buddy in Connecticut recently went to one where they actually filmed, they showed the movie, but then I don't know how they were doing the commentary over it. Yeah, the format, simple as can be, but genius.
Yeah.
Some of the jokes, there are jokes that go over your head. There's running jokes throughout the movie. They'll even make fun of the names in the credits, which is always funny stuff.
And then, of course, we've got our robot characters, Tom Servo, Crow, and Gypsy. So they're always the constants, no matter who the host is, and they're still the characters up there, although they're voiced by different voice actors now. So the setup is originally Joel Hodgson played an interstellar janitor, I guess, that was trapped up there with robots by a mad scientist who experiments on him by sending him terrible movies to watch and seeing how his mind deals with it. So, and that's pretty much how it's been running from the beginning up till now. And the mad scientist characters are now played by Felicia Day, who is a player on a lot of the Joss Whedon shows, and Patton Oswalt as her side.
Oh, really?
Hilarious, yeah.
I didn't realize Oswald was in it.
Yeah, he's in it. He's in it now. So yeah, Mystery Science Theater is my number 3.
Nice, good call on that one. Wow, we're at number 2 already.
We're at number 2 already.
All right, this is where we're going to start overlapping. I truly believe if this show is not on either one of your lists, I'll be very surprised.
All right.
X-Files, probably the biggest, most influential TV show in the last 20 plus years. The show, when it first came out, blew my mind.
I was obsessed with this show.
Absolutely obsessed. This was back when the internet was still in its infancy, and you couldn't just go to like a website. You had to hack in to get access to these websites because they weren't just xfiles.com. It was all kinds of convoluted. And I remember going on with my friend Frank, and we would dissect each episode. And that was probably one of the first series where I realized that episodes had names attached to them.
Yes.
Right? But
because that was one of the first shows that came out on DVD, like as a full season as well.
Yeah, and I had the full box set. I mean, we were completely invested. When the movie came out, it was an event that we all went to, and then immediately went to the diner and just tore it apart because it tied directly into it tied together 2 seasons. So it was setting up what was to come. It wasn't a standalone story. It definitely, and the great thing about that show, which is it works on 2 levels, because you can watch any episode and it's the monster of the week kind of a thing, or you've got the underlying storyline, the mythology of Mulder and his sister being abducted. Was she abducted by aliens? There's a secret society with the smoking man, just crazy stuff. That this is a show that ran way too long because it was a monster hit. Fox didn't want to let go of it. This was a Friday night. We used to religiously watch this, get Chinese food, watch X-Files every Friday night. But after a while, it's like, what? Both lead actors left. They brought in Robert Patrick. Robert Patrick and Annabelle Gish.
Yes. Yeah. So Mulder left first. David Duchovny left.
Yep.
And then Gillian Anderson hung on for another season, and then she left. So they were slowly trying to bring in Robert Patrick and
Annabelle Gish
as the Mulder and Scully.
Yeah.
Taking over from Mulder, and it didn't work.
No,
it did not work.
Because these 2 actors, David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson, just cemented themselves as these characters.
They did, and it felt like that they were my friends. That was the sad thing.
You were completely invested in them, and she was the scientific skeptic, and he was the I'm all in believer. So you either sided with Scully or you sided with Mulder, and Mulder was like so gullible that they would just get into trouble week after week because he was just so ready to believe that there was an alien or there's a monster.
You can deny all the things I've seen, all the things I've discovered, but not for much longer. And no government agency has jurisdiction over the truth.
And after a while, they started kind of making fun. There's certain episodes that are straight up comedies. So they really started messing with the formula a little bit.
Yeah, that's one of the great things. All those episodes are so varied as well. They could go into
you brought in different directors. Directors had a different take. And Duchovny, say what you will about him, but he really was genius because he knew that character so well that he could nuance. Oh my!
What was that? That wasn't on my end.
No, that was a car. So,
are you sure it wasn't the burrito you had last night?
It was not.
Wow, that brought the show to a screeching halt. I think Mike's being abducted over there. Woof. So yes, this show I can't say enough about, and they brought it back. I think the first episode was 93. So it's been out for a hell of a long time. When I was doing the graphic for the Instagram, I did nothing but just cultivate TV guide covers. There must be 25. There must be 25 X-Files covers out there.
Yeah, who knows how many Entertainment Weekly X-Files covers there are.
Yeah. I mean, and there was a point where I would buy them all.
Yeah.
You know?
The Rolling Stone. I've got the Rolling Stone with Gillian Anderson and the Creature from the Black Lagoon.
A couple conventions where, you know, Krychek and some of these other second degree.
Krychek. Whoa.
Some of these other characters, the alien bounty hunter, the guy, I can't even remember the actor's name.
Yeah, he was also on Buffy as a vampire, that guy.
Okay. Just over the years, I mean, Peter Boyle was in an episode, the last...
Charles Nelson Riley. Remember that one?
Charles Nelson Riley. That's right. That was a comedy one. That was
a comedy one, yeah.
Yeah. Just Roswell. Yeah. Just so well done. But it has been diluted a bit over the years.
Humbug, that episode with the...
that was...
Yeah.
Yeah, there were some straight up horror ones. I mean, there was some, you know, modern day Prometheus and some of these other episodes.
And Home which was like almost Texas Chainsaw Massacre with
that was the one. Yes, Home. That was a nightmarish inducing. But you never knew what you were gonna get in these episodes, and you would every now and again you would get these. You know, there were straight up mythology episodes. You knew you were going to get the alien conspiracy. You knew you were going to get the smoking man. I do think that Skinner was the worst boss in the world because he would constantly yell at them, "Stop doing this! You're putting me in a bad situation." And then he'd help them out.
Wink at him. That was like winking at him after he yelled at him.
He would help them out one episode, and then he'd rat them out the next episode. It's like, dude, make up your mind.
The thing I loved about it was that the Monster of the Week stuff never overshadowed the characters of Mulder and Scully. It was always based around them and their reactions to what was going on. So the storylines never overshadowed them. It was very much their show, always.
Yeah. This teetered on being my number one. And they brought it back a couple times. We had a reboot, not a reboot, but they had a new season recently. It was like 10 episodes. But I think Gillian Anderson just said she's done. And there's a point where just stop milking it. Just, you know, give me the story, finish it up, and just let them go off into the sunset. But yeah, they had 2 movies. They made 2 movies out of this. And like I said, the first movie, just the truth is out there, just tied directly in. I think it was season 4 and season 5. And
the second movie was just a lost opportunity, just like the end of the series. It was, I don't know why they did it. It's not cinematic in any way.
No, it was very underwhelming. It was a paycheck.
Doesn't dilute what the X-Files.
No, and it was a huge. It was our Lost before Lost was.
Oh, definitely
on the horizon.
I'm glad you brought it up. I did stay away from X-Files because I was hoping that it would be represented by one of you guys, so I did not put.
Well, as I said, for it not to be on our list, I would have been shocked. So.
But yeah, it does. The fact that it went downhill so quickly in the last 2 seasons does kind of cast a shadow over it. So I would definitely put it as number 6, number 7 on my list of.
But that's like you can invest in the first 6 seasons and be completely content without even getting into those replacement episodes.
Right.
I've only seen like 2 episodes my whole life.
What? That blows my mind.
That must be like me in Game of Thrones. Were you
purposely
trying to stay away from it, Mike?
No, not at all. I saw one episode, and you guys will probably remember it, but they were in some sort of scary house, and there was this woman with like no arms and legs.
That's Home. That's Home. That's the episode Jim just mentioned, which is probably the scariest episode of the entire series.
Right. And I was so disturbed by it. I'm like, I'm never watching this.
This is so disturbing. Between that and that Kolchak episode, Mike's like,
yeah, no, it never got any worse than that.
I mean, so that's funny that I brought up Kolchak because Kolchak is the grandfather of the X-Files.
Sure.
The X-Files is directly an extension of what Kolchak was back in the day. Matter of fact, they brought him on the show. Wasn't he on the show?
Did. Darren McGavin. Yeah, he was. Yeah. They literally had this character played by Darren McGavin as the first keeper of the X-Files. So
yeah. So that was a great nod. Everything ties together.
Number 2.
Number 2 for me, Star Trek: The Next Generation.
The Next Generation.
Is this not on either of your list?
It's on my honorable mention. I stayed away from Star Trek a little bit. The Next Generation, because I've gone on record that Star Trek, the original Star Trek, I back-ended it because once Wrath of Khan came out, but Next Generation came out right around the time 87. 87. So I was in the college, and that was like just a staple. And they did such a fantastic job of just taking that concept and that universe and just go ahead.
I mean, it was one of these ones where, I wasn't like, it was a slow burn on the first season. And
yeah, it took a bit for them to kind of find their footing.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Game of Thrones, which is kind of a slow burn the first season. It picks up at the tail end of that, and I'm not spoiling anything. But they just did such a great job with this. You had the holodeck, you had Q, you had the Borg.
Yeah, Q was unlike anything we'd ever seen in the Star Trek universe.
And it's, looking back on it, there are so many bad Star Trek films, and some of these episodes were so good that they could have been motion pictures.
Yeah.
I mean, there are and some of them actually were. So some of the Borg episodes, when they introduced the Borg, you're like, what?
Best of both worlds.
Yeah.
It was, Time Zero. I mean, there was those 2-part episodes. They would, once they got their footing and they started going, I mean, they would do those season finales that would just leave you hanging. You had to wait a whole year for, the one where they found Data's head buried in the ground. That was the Time Zero or whatever. And Guinan is another great character. Whoopi Goldberg, who cited Nichelle Nichols as one of her big influences as a kid growing up, seeing a black woman on a spaceship back in the 60s. That was huge for her. She's like, she can do it. I can do it. And for her to play that character is just absolutely,
I mean, you go back and you think about some of the episodes, the one where I forget what it's called. It's a Sherlock Holmes episode with Moriarty in it.
Oh yeah. That's what he's on the holodeck. Yeah.
And he knows he's in the holodeck. And you're like, this is mind blowing, right? He recognizes in the holodeck. I was so disappointed when they canceled it because it was just quality episode after quality episode. And I was like viscerally mad for like a number of years about it.
Yeah. And the movies, like you said, the movies never really lived up to the potential. There never was Wrath of Khan for the Next Generation. Generations itself was just tying the two universes with Captain Kirk. But your bad guy wasn't that great.
Yeah, and with the movies, you always had to sort of reintroduce all the cast again, and you're like...
it always, every movie's either a Picard or Data based. Those are always your two main characters. So.
And even I came to like Riker at the end.
Oh, you didn't like?
Yeah, not to begin with, and I was just like, wow,
Yeah. Geordi, how many episodes in a row did he just say you need a level 9 diagnostic?
Yeah.
You got to run a level 1 diagnostic. That was the answer to anything that was an issue with the ship. And that was when we first realized that they could just detach the saucer from the body.
That is right.
Yeah. And I think that Enterprise was significantly bigger than the original Enterprise. Yeah, good call.
Just a fantastic show.
I have DS9 on my list as like number 6.
Really? I did enjoy DS9.
I liked that a lot because it was vastly different from anything that Star Trek was up until that point. And like I brought up with Babylon 5, that, there's a big controversy that they just stole his ideas.
Make it so.
But that was a grittier Star Trek.
And Jim, what do you think of this choice?
Jim's very quiet over there.
Well, Star Trek is kind of like X-Files for you, Mike. I've never seen a full episode of Next Generation.
Ever.
I know the Borg episode. I know that one. I think I may have seen that one, but I haven't.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, not a Star Trek guy.
This revelations here are just...
I think I feel differently about you now.
I look at you differently.
I do. You're not the same Jim.
But that makes you want to just expose him.
Have I bluffed my way through a Next Generation discussion at some point?
Oh, I like that episode. Yeah, that guy was good.
Yeah, that was great.
I agree totally.
Yeah.
Mike, you hit every point. Okay, so what's your number 2, Jim? I'm curious.
Okay, I'm sure both of you are going to feel the same about my number 2 as to what my experience is with Star Trek Next Generation. It was so hard for me to pick one of his shows that I had to give a triumvirate for number 2. So
of course.
This is a Joss Whedon 3-pack. This is my Buffy, Angel, and Firefly. All 3 are equals for me. Yeah. Just great, funny shows that are so well written and such indelible characters. We're talking about Mulder and Scully before, but the Scooby Gang from Buffy, we've got, Buffy herself, Xander, Willow, Oz, and Giles, of course, which is her watcher. So the setup of Buffy is every generation has a Slayer, and it's usually bestowed upon one young girl that's in high school age to defend the world against the forces of evil. And so the Slayer in this case is Buffy Summers, And her high school is situated right over the Hellmouth, which is where all the evil forces come out.
I think that's every high school.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think this whole show was a metaphor for high school. So every episode, this is very much a Monster of the Week show where she's dealing with a different supernatural force every week. And she usually uses Mr. Pointy as her stake to get things done.
Mr. Pointy, he actually had a name?
He had a name. Yep, she named her stake. So, and of course, we had the romance with Angel, who is the good vampire. David Boreanaz.
Oh, all right.
I don't know how you pronounce it.
I don't know. I thought that was silent.
He's Angel to me. So
he's Angel. Oh.
So, of course, he left the series 3 seasons in, and he had his own show.
He had his own show.
Which is also written by Joss, and it had his own cast of characters, which is a great show. And his background is that he was an evil vampire called Angelus, the most evil of the vampires in history, apparently. But he messed with the wrong gypsy who cursed him and gave him his soul back. So he's the only vampire that actually has a soul. So that's why Angel is a good vampire and everybody else is bad. Then we also have James Marsters as Spike, which is Angel and Buffy's archenemy.
Thank you. That thing was gonna kill me.
Well, what do you expect? Out alone in this neighborhood? I got half a mind to kill you myself, you half-wit. I mean, honestly, what kind of retard wears heels like that in a dark alley? Take 2 steps, break your bloody ankle.
I was just trying to get home.
Well, get a cab, you moron. And on the way, if a stranger offers you candy, don't get in the van.
So yeah, those 2 shows, Buffy and Angel, are just so character-driven, so well-written, so funny, filled with pop culture references and just special effects goodness. I cannot speak enough about Buffy and Angel. Of course, Firefly, I think you guys are familiar with.
Yes. Probably one of the greatest single-season TV shows ever.
Yeah. Talk about being mad after something was canceled. I didn't watch Firefly until years after it was canceled.
Exactly. Same way. Yeah. You immediately jumped on a bandwagon like, these people are idiots.
Yeah.
Although I will say the movie with Serenity was well done. They at least allowed him to go back and finish the storyline.
Yes. I love Serenity as well. But the Brown Coats storyline in Firefly, Mal, love Nathan Fillion.
The pitter-patter of tiny feet and huge combat boots.
Shut up! Yeah, it is hands down probably the greatest single season of a television show. And really, all you have to say, it's a Western in space. They speak Chinese, and there's some other weird things going on there. But yeah, it's a mishmash of kind of genres, but it's well done.
Yeah. So, Jim, you've turned our top 5 list into a top 7 list.
As Jim does. Although I will follow your Star Trek revelation and tell you that I have only watched 1 episode of Buffy in my entire life, and it was the season finale.
The very last episode.
The very last episode. Yeah. And I have friends who are like, dude, if you could just get through season 1, it's brilliant. And I'm like, so I gotta sit through 24 episodes before it starts.
No, I disagree with that. A lot of people, they beat down season 1, but I look at it as the same way you look at the Harry Potter movies. It evolves just like you're in high school, and the Harry Potter movies evolve like you're a young kid and then you're getting more serious. And that's how I look at the Buffy seasons. The first season is the freshman year in high school. So it is rudimentary, but it's still funny, and it's still a good show at the same time. So I don't think season 1 is an endurance test. It's just the first part of the journey.
Right. So you brought up Joss Whedon. He had a couple other shows as well. Yes or no? Did he not do Dollhouse? Yes,
he had Dollhouse as well, which was not as good, but still worthy, I think.
Dark Angel?
Dark Angel. Was that Joss Whedon? I don't think it was.
No. Was that James Cameron?
It may have been James Cameron.
Because that was, I'm drawing a blank on her name, but she's a
Jessica
woman.
Alba?
Jessica Alba.
Yeah,
and
no, that's,
Alias.
That's James Cameron. That is James Cameron.
And then what about Alias?
Alias is J.J. Abrams.
That's who I'm getting mixed in there.
Yeah. They're an exclusive club, believe me. So yeah, that's my number 2.
Sarah Connor Chronicles. That was a great show. I kind of mashed those all together there.
All right, so that was my number 2. So Jeff, you're up, number 1.
All right, my number 1. You guys are gonna laugh at this. People like I've never watched. If you haven't seen an episode of Babylon 5, you've never seen an episode of this. I do want to mention though, because we've talked about Firefly, Heroes season 1 was up there with Firefly as one of the greatest single season. Don't watch season 2 because they just rehashed it. But Heroes was a monster show.
How many seasons of that were there?
Too many.
Yeah.
I think it went 3 or 4, but 3 was just a complete rehash of what happened in season 1, and nobody learned a thing. It was horrible. So I never even watched past then. My number one show, this came out in 99 to 2004, and I was at a convention for this show September 8th, 2001. So it was a couple days before 9/11. And I got a phone call from my wife that we were pregnant with our second child, and it was a boy. And I immediately wanted to call him Kirk because William Shatner was in attendance the day before. This is a show called Farscape, and I see the blank look.
Wait, I sort of remember this. Go on, Jeff.
So the premise of this is that there's this character, his name is John Crichton, and he's an astronaut. And he creates this ship that opens up a wormhole. And he gets sucked to the other side of the universe and ends up on a living ship with a bunch of other creatures that you find out they're all prisoners. All these shows, everyone can speak English. You understand them. There's no translator or whatever. You find out that they put this little bug in his ear so he can. But it's produced by the Jim Henson Company, so a lot of the characters are full-on Muppets. There's a pilot who's just this mushroom head alien that controls. He's like a symbiote, controls the living ship Moya. There's another character, Rigel, but you have Aaron Soon, Zahn, and Dargo. And it's just, he's a fish out of water, and he's constantly throwing pop culture references because he has nothing. But you as the audience get it, but no one else around him gets it. But it's just such a well-done show. And it's one of these shows that I absolutely was in love with. Visually, it was phenomenal. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Rockne S. O'Bannon wrote and directed pretty much all of this stuff. And he came from like Sequest, Alien Nation. I guess he had done some stuff with Amazing Stories. And then he had also created that Revolution we talked about before.
Wait a second. Rockne S. O'Bannon.
Yes.
That's
a great name, right?
Yeah.
That's a great name. Rockne. Just call me Rockne O'Bannon. So, yeah, I see the blank look on your eyes that no one has ever watched this show.
Well, again, like Babylon 5, I've heard of this, but yeah, I've never seen it. I have the box set. So how many seasons and where did it?
I think that this was another one of those syndicated shows, so it showed up, I want to say, 99. It probably was on WB, PIX. I'm trying to remember where it even ran. And then they did they did one movie that kind of tied everything up like a year or two after the series went off, the Peacekeeper Wars. But just so well done. Visually, it was just, like I said, unlike anything you'd ever seen. Very funny. Like I said, like you said with Buffy, there's a lot of pop culture references, but the characters around him don't get any of it, which is the funny part. So just likable characters. Visually, like I said, just visually, it's out of this world. No pun intended.
I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah.
Please do so.
Number one. That
is my number one. And I jockeyed around for a bit, but this one is high on my list.
All right, Mike, what do you got? Number one.
It's already been said, Battlestar Galactica. It was just such a slow burn, and I love the idea that the Cylons were skin jobs, and it was just, I didn't even mind like the drama episodes so much because you knew that you were going to get some epic space battle somewhere in there that I just thought it was so well done.
What I used to love about that? So in the original show, everything was in your face. They wanted to show off the model. They wanted to show off every dollar that they put into the show. But on this one, what was cool was that you got the sense of just space being vast. And you would see the Galactica, and as a Viper would launch, it was almost like someone was floating in space with a little zoom lens camera. And the thing would come shooting out, and it would just be a pinpoint, and they would zoom in on the ship.
Yes.
So it was almost like a handheld camera in space, and it just took all those space fights and everything that we've seen 1,000 times before and just upped the ante because it was something you hadn't seen before. So stuff like that. But yeah, the Cylons were just so well realized.
Yeah.
They weren't just robots.
Right. And they're sort of revealed over time over the episodes. Wait. This person's a Cylon?
Yeah. I mean, they became sympathetic and, yeah.
And then the fact, even the further reveal is that the Cylons were identical to each other. The skin jobs were identical to each other, that there was more than one
version.
Number 7.
Yeah. It was, just loved it.
You think this is over? This is not over! You have not heard the last! No more Mr. the nice guys!
No, Jim, I don't know if you can actually vote anymore.
This number one choice may be controversial. I don't know if it can be counted as a TV show or not.
Oh, no, here we go. So you gave us 3 TV shows in the last pick, and now you're picking a non-TV show as your number one?
Well, this is very specific to the New York area, the tri-state area, I should say. And it aired 5 times a week on ABC, the 4:30 movie.
5 times a week.
Now you've talked about this a lot.
I have. So this show. Well, it's a movie that was run every single weekday on ABC. So it was prime after-school territory. 4:30 in the afternoon. You were either watching the Flintstones or you're watching this. It began to air in January 1968, and at that time it was a 2-hour broadcast. In 71, it was cut down to 90 minutes. So that means that 90 minutes with commercials. So any film that showed on the 4:30 movie had to be edited severely for time. And they did genre weeks. They did Planet of the Apes week. That's where I got my Planet of the Apes fix. Planet of the Apes, they would run it over 2 days, part 1 and part 2. Then they would do Beneath the Planet of the Apes. They would do Escape, and then they would do Conquest on Friday. So you had that week that you would look forward to once a year. They would do Japanese Monster Week, and they didn't really have the rights to Godzilla. They had Mothra. They had Frankenstein Conquers the World. They had a Gamera movie called Attack of the Monsters, which I so remember vividly. It was these 2 alien women that kidnapped 2 little kids from Earth, and they shave their heads to eat their brains, and Gamera has to come and rescue the 2 little kids.
Wow. That's
The X from Outer Space, Voyage into Space. The Green Slime was on the 4:30 movie. They had Edgar Allan Poe weeks, which Vincent Price / Edgar Allan Poe, so you'd get The Pit and the Pendulum, The Mask of the Red Death, The Raven, The Conqueror Worm.
Enter Death's waiting room, if you dare.
What's in there?
Torment, torture, and terror.
You promised me entertainment, but I never hoped for this.
A movie that extends the limit of unbearable horror.
For the uninvited, there is much to fear.
Bizarre tale of madness and the unknown. The Mask of Red Death.
Tomorrow on the 4:30 movie.
You'd get The Fly, Return of the Fly. This is what fed me as a kid. This really was what turned me into who I am today, I think, is the 4:30 movie.
Curse you, 4:30 movie.
They were just readily available for you to watch, and, without adult supervision. They were just on TV. And I remember so vividly waiting for the soap operas to end. I think General Hospital used to come on at 3. The Edge of Night used to come on at 4.
The Edge of Night.
And then at 4:30, we'd run into the movie. I'm just looking at the list I've written down as stuff that they played on the show. The Blob. They had, I think, Harryhausen weeks. They had Jason and the Argonauts. They had Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. Gwanji. They also had Omega Man. Soylent Green was one of the 4:30 movies. Empire of the Ants, Frogs, Food of the Gods, The Shuttered Room. The list goes on. All these genre movies. The 4:30 movie ended in 1981. The last movie shown was called Plymouth Adventure, and it was run on Thanksgiving Day. It was some Thanksgiving movie from the 70s. The next day, a football game aired, and then the following Monday, The People's Court was on at 4:30. And I remember,
Judge Wapner took you out.
remember tuning in on that Monday at 4:30 just to see what they were playing, and I was in disbelief. I grabbed the TV guide and I looked.
What?
Every day, 4:30, and I think for a month afterwards, I was in denial. I would get the TV guide first thing and look at 4:30 every single weekday.
Did you send letters? Did you send hate mail to Rusty the Bailiff?
If it was now, I would have. Both ABC and Rusty the Bailiff.
Rusty the Bailiff.
So, but it's really sad that I think my generation, I was 10 years old when the 4:30 movie ended. So my generation is really the last that will remember this, and we're just getting older. So this may be lost to time soon.
Yeah.
Not if you have anything to do with it, Jim.
Not if I have anything to do.
So this is what you do. We got to buy a movie theater, which I always wanted to do. There was a movie theater it showed porns when I lived in Queens, and it was just a rundown little thing. And I always wanted to turn it into like a teen center and just play those type of movies all day long. You pay one price, you come in. I got a food, maybe you got a couple pool tables or whatever. You just turn it into a teen center. You want to go watch a movie? You want to go hang out with your friends?
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it never materialized because obviously
let's do a TMI teen center after we.
There you go. I like it. I like it. Free popcorn, baby.
Let's give back to our community.
So we hit a lot of shows. None of us mentioned Lost.
Good point. Yeah.
I wasn't sure it qualified.
I would have to put it in. I mean, but that's like Game of Thrones. It's not really sci-fi. It's fantasy, right? I mean, Lost is. They didn't really spend too much time concreting it into scientific. It was all.
It's religious, really.
Yeah, I'm surprised we didn't. It's on my list, but it didn't make the top 5. Obviously, I just meant Twilight Zone was another one.
Anyone have Logan's Run?
Jim had mentioned that early on.
Yeah,
you mentioned that whole Logan's Run, Buck Rogers.
Now, Logan's Run was a movie that they turned into.
They turned into a TV show.
And I remember watching the movie maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It's terrible. It is terrible. I think the show was much better, just from my memory of it.
I don't remember the TV show. Land of the Lost. I had on my honorable mentions. That was another.
I think we have to
get up pretty early on Saturday to watch that too.
But they also would run those occasionally on weekday afternoons, so maybe that could come up again on our weekday.
Okay. Nobody had The Rain.
No, nobody.
Rasmus.
Simone.
Do you remember a TV show called Sliders?
Yes, I remember the name of it, like Farscape and Babylon 5, but I never actually watched it.
Was it on at 4:30?
It was not. Maybe Jim never watched it on 4:30. No, I think this was another syndicated show. It was good. I liked it. John Rhys Davies, who was Salah from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Wasn't that Gimli as well?
Gimli. Yeah. Jerry O'Connell, who was in Stand By Me. He actually had his own. Do you remember the other TV show he had in the late 80s called My Secret Identity? He was a teenager who developed superpowers very much like the Flash. Like his neighbor was a scientist or whatever and dumped chemicals on him and he could fly.
Oh, really?
No, you don't remember that?
I don't remember that, no.
No. And then the only other show I brought up last week, which Jim didn't remember, this was only 8 episodes of this. Mike, I don't know if you remember this. This was right in the heyday when Star Wars, so it was 77, 78, written by Buck Henry, called Quark.
Oh, I do remember it. I do remember of it. I don't remember it.
He was like, everything I read on IMDb, people are like, this show was brilliant. This was genius. The jokes were out of control. It only lasted 8 episodes. This needs to come out on disc. I vaguely remember just the fact that they ran like a garbage scow, and his co-pilot was a giant plant named Ficus. And Richard Benjamin was the main character. But it was written by Buck Henry. That's pretty high pedigree right there.
That is. Yeah, that is. So there you have it. 50 episodes, ladies and gentlemen.
That's a lot of TV shows. And we have 2 top 5 lists that were sent in by our listeners. So we can go through and see how they compare to ours. One is the real Jack Hammer, our friend Jack from a couple episodes ago of the Electric Radio Show, chimed in. And if you want to know his top 5, how they stacked up. Number 5, Quantum Leap.
Oh.
Now, it's funny because he brought up Quantum Leap on his show.
Yes, he did.
So that's his number 5. Number 4 is the X-Files.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3 is Star Trek Voyager.
Ooh.
Which I find interesting because
Janeway.
that was one of my lesser favorite.
Is that the one with the guy with the big ears?
That's Spock?
No, the guy with the big ears with the sharp teeth.
No, that's
that's a Ferengi. No, that's actually his number 2, Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Okay.
Yeah. That was Quark.
I knew it would come to this.
His name was Quark.
I wonder if that's a homage to the Richard Benjamin show.
That's weird. And then his number 1 was the Next Generation Star Trek.
He is steeped in Star Trek.
He actually said that he could have just loaded up all 5 with Star Trek. So I think the only thing he's missing is Enterprise and the original series. Because he's got 3. His top 3 are Star Trek. And then our other listener, Trish Santiago.
Yes, my cousin, who I don't think actually listens. She just follows us on Facebook.
That's fine. We'll give her a shout out because her number 5 is Star Trek. I'm assuming it's the original.
Yeah, I would assume so as well. Yes.
Number 4, Stranger Things. Number 3, she went on Lost. Number 2, a show we did not discuss, Fringe.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because that was another well set up show that kind of went nowhere after season 3, maybe. And then her number 1 is X-Files. Well, I think we were prime demographics.
So yeah, and if you want to give us your top 5, don't hesitate. Go to TMI Podcast 2018 at gmail.com. That's TMI Podcast 2018 at gmail.com.
You can also jump on the Facebook and the Instagram. Still have the graphic up.
So
like
shall we talk about next week's episode?
What? We keep going?
We're going. 51, baby. 51.
50.
So what we're going to discuss next week is something called Love, Death, and Robots, a Netflix animated show that we hope that you will watch along with us. So you're prepared next week when you listen.
I'm very excited. This is getting good buzz. It's an anthology series, animated. And even though there's 18 episodes, I don't think any episode is longer than 18 minutes. Some as short as 6 minutes.
So it's an easy watch, in other words.
I hope so.
And also next week, we're pulling out Jeff's pick for that movie that you love, but nobody else has ever heard of, called Treasure Planet. And I know Mike is so chomping at the bit to see this movie.
Mike was
Where can I view this?
Is it on Netflix? Did
I don't think it is. I booked it yesterday on my library, through my library.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to see if it's.
I do have a copy of it. Unfortunately, I loaned it out to a friend because her brother is best friends with Johnny Resnick, the lead singer of the Goo Goo Dolls, who does the theme song in this. And I handed it off to her to get autographed.
Right.
And like a moron, I don't know why I gave her the entire thing and didn't just keep the disc.
Oh, just take out the slip cover and.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
And who knows? I may never see it again. It may just be lost somewhere in the times. But that was the goal.
So yeah. So again, thank you for sticking with us for 50 episodes.
Yeah, here's to the next 50.
Yeah,
that's right.
See you later, guys.
Before anyone passes judgment, may I remind you, we are in the Arctic.